to begin recording. Thank you very much, Anya. And hi, Sean. Nice to see you.
Hi. I apologize for my technical difficulties.
Okay. Again, just a reminder, if you're calling in, you can either use the function on your phone to manually mute yourself or use *6 to mute and then *6 to unmute. Alrighty. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Joanne Brown, and I'm Chair of Community Board 14, and I will be presiding over this hearing. Okay, let's get going. This public hearing is called to order at 6:33 p.m. on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021, Eastern Daylight Standard Time, virtually via Webex, also live streaming on YouTube. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony by community members with respect to a proposed shelter that Department of Social Services and Department of Homeless Services has contracted with the Children's Rescue Fund for 200 single adults at 1 Kenilworth Place. The shelter is expected to open spring of 2022. Members of the public who are viewing the meeting on YouTube and would like to comment on this issue can email info@cb14brooklyn.com, and those emails will be included in the public record of this hearing. Please include your name, community affiliation, name of organization if applicable with your testimony. Members of the board who are participating in this hearing via Webex can use the raise hand option or ask to speak in the comments on the Webex screen. For pre-registered speakers and members of the public, please clearly state for the record your name, community affiliation, and organization if applicable prior to giving testimony. The time limit for all community speakers is 3 minutes. The agenda for tonight's hearing will be as follows. A presentation from New York City Department of Homeless Services and the facility operator. Then we will take questions from elected officials or the representatives. Then we will take questions from board members. And then we will take questions from pre-registered speakers. If they have sent their comment via email, that will be read into the record. Please note, for the sake of time, if there are multiple representatives from a community affiliation or organization, please appoint only one representative to speak on behalf of your affiliation or organization. And as time allows, we will take questions from the public from the floor. I'd like to invite Erin Drinkwater to present from the Department of Homeless Services. Hi, we haven't met before. Nice to meet you. And you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the opportunity to hold this hearing and to join this evening to learn more about the proposal at 1 Kenilworth Place that the Children's Rescue Fund will be operating. My name is Erin Drinkwater. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs at the Department of Social Services. I want to give a little background on homelessness in New York City and then speak specifically to this project, and then turn it over to the provider to talk a little bit about themselves and the philosophy behind the work that they do and the program that they intend to operate at 1 Kenilworth Place. So homelessness has been a many decades problem across New York City and the country. Under this administration, we've made significant strides to address issues that have built up over many decades. Between 1994 and 2014, we saw a 115% increase in homelessness. Between the years 2011 and 2014, that year alone demonstrated a 40% increase in homelessness. A key contributing factor during that period of time was the ending of the city-state rental assistance program known as Advantage. When this administration took over, we swiftly took action in terms of addressing the crisis of homelessness. A lot of that work focused on prevention, and then in 2017, the mayor issued a comprehensive plan called Turning the Tide, which has 4 pillars and really seeks to address the crisis of homelessness. I can just talk about those pillars a little bit. It'll provide, I think, some helpful context to our discussion this evening. One, talked about prevention just a moment ago. We've invested a significant amount of resources in prevention. Why? Because we know that if somebody can stay in their home, that is a better outcome for that family. It is less expensive than shelter. So we created the first in the nation Right to Counsel program. Any New Yorker who is eligible based on their income has access to legal counsel and attorneys in housing court. Through that work, evictions in New York City are down 40% while they are increasing across the country. During this past 18 months, we've seen what happens when the eviction machine is halted. Under the various statutes, we've prevented, there was a moratorium on evictions that allowed individuals to stay in their home. We've also driven down prevention by making it easier for individuals who require resources such as getting connected to benefits, getting connected to rental assistance, to be able to do that in their home communities. The city has long since had a program called Home Base that allows individuals to gain access to these programs and services through community-based organizations. When this administration took office, there were 14 of those locations across the city. Today, there are 26. Individuals can go to those offices and get connected to resources, get assistance or if they have back rent payments, back utility payments, if they're eligible for rental assistance to stay housed in their current residence. This administration has also more than doubled the amount of rental arrears that have been paid to keep people in their homes. These are all just part of the work that we've done to prevent homelessness. And our work is showing progress. When this administration took office, there were about 60,000 people in shelter. There's about 46,000 individuals and families in shelter as of last night. We've also worked to rebuild rental assistance. I mentioned the significant increase to homelessness from 2011 to 2014. When this administration came into office, we immediately rebuilt the rental assistance programs, first with what was called LINK, which was then streamlined into city FHEPS. We just recently made some important announcements around city FHEPS after negotiating a piece of legislation with the city council, increasing those rent levels to Section 8 rent levels, making it easier for New Yorkers to find housing with those rental assistance programs. Through those programs, our rental assistance programs and rehousing programs, we have helped more than 175,000 New Yorkers move out of shelter or avoid entry into shelter. We've also paid significant attention to New York City's homelessness population who is residing on the streets. We've increased the number of outreach workers from 200 to 600, and we've increased the number of low threshold stabilization beds from 600 to about to over 3,000, with more beds coming online in the coming months. Through this work, we've helped more than 42,000 New Yorkers come in off the streets and stay in off the streets, being connected to supportive housing and permanent housing through that work. And then we really focused to transform a haphazard shelter system that grew up over many decades. We made a commitment under Turning the Tide to get out of clusters. Clusters are apartment units in apartment buildings where the city would utilize, a handful here and there. They were very difficult to provide social services in, but also they took those units off of the affordable housing stock because they were operating as shelter. We are on our way to make good on the commitment to end the use of clusters and are more than 90% complete with that task. We've also made the commitment to get out of commercial hotels. Commercial hotels and clusters have always been a stopgap measure where if the city did not have appropriate shelter options, we would need to utilize those options to ensure that we didn't run afoul of the city's right to shelter court mandates. We are also on our way to getting out of the commercial hotels. We prioritized getting our families out of commercial hotels first, recognizing that commercial hotels are a difficult environment, again, to have social services delivered, but also that families would be, crowded in a small hotel room. And we continue to make good on that commitment to get out of commercial hotels by 2023. We've reduced the footprint of the DHS shelter footprint through this work, as well as closing facilities that did not meet our standards in terms of delivering high services in a quality environment for our clients. We've reduced the DHS footprint by about 40%. And that brings us to what we're here to talk about tonight, the part of the Turning the Tide plan, which was a commitment to open 90 high quality shelters. We have announced on those shelters, we have 47 open and operating, and the difference between those announced on and those open has to do with the time of development to ensure that we're bringing on high quality shelters. Part of the Turning the Tide commitment in locating those 90 shelters was really to ask New York City's communities to play a role in solving the crisis of homelessness, making sure that because New Yorkers from every community district are residing in our shelters as a temporary path back to permanent housing, that every community plays a solution in addressing the crisis of homelessness. And so that brings us to the one Kenilworth Place location. As was mentioned by the chair, this location is intended to serve 200 single adult women. We had initially spoken with the community board and our elected officials many months ago and had proposed this for a different population run by a different provider. But we're here tonight with the Children's Rescue Fund, who submitted an open-ended RFP that was rated and approved by the Department of Homeless Services and awarded the proposal to move forward at this site. I'd like to give a little bit of background from the Department of Homeless Services point of view in terms of how clients get connected to the shelter. So Department of Homeless Services has a centralized intake for our single adult system. We're talking about women tonight. So women have 2 points of entry. They can enter through our intake location in the Bronx or in Brooklyn. Once the individuals come to that intake center, we work to learn about them and the reasons for their homelessness. It's our priority to, at every turn, try to divert people from shelter. We want to know if an individual has an alternative housing option that they might be able to take advantage of. If they need rental arrears paid, we work to get those rent arrears paid. If they've been illegally evicted or legally evicted, we want to make sure that they're connected to legal services in the event that we can preserve that tenancy. Once intake occurs and we learn a little bit about the individuals and the complexity of issues that they come to us with requiring our services, we're able to place them in what's called a program shelter. The location that the Children's Rescue Fund will be operating is a program shelter. They will have on-site social services. They will have off-site linkages to other social services. They will have on-site security and really work to connect these women from day one from their status in our shelter to their road back to permanent housing. They work with housing specialists, determine whether or not the women are eligible for the rental assistance that I discussed, and really work to transition the individuals back to housing. I'm happy to answer any questions about DHS and our work, but I think what I'd like to do now is turn it over to the Executive Director of the Children's Rescue Fund to talk a little bit about the program that they intend to operate at Kenilworth, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the board and the community has tonight. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just like to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Orlando Ivy. I am the president and CEO of the Children's Rescue Fund. I see that I'm joined on this call by a couple of members of my team, first being Angela Gonzalez, who's our Senior Vice President of Programs. Also, Ms. Tahisha Lu Hing, who's our Vice President of Operations. And I also saw one of our program directors, Mr. Pierre. There you go. A little bit about us. So we've been providing services to New York's most needy since 1992, approximately 29 years. So we do have a long track record of working with the homeless in New York. And we operate under our mission, which is to support individuals and families toward long-term stability and partner with them and others providing housing, access to critical services, education, and skills. We operate with a vision, and our vision is to empower lives, enrich individuals and families. So we are a very service-driven agency. We currently operate 5 programs in the boroughs. We have closed down a couple earlier this year. As Erin spoke on, there has been a dip in the need earlier on due to the moratorium. And unfortunately, we do see the homeless population in the city increasing. I think with that dip, it certainly gave the Department of Homeless Services an opportunity to get rid of what we would call less desirable facilities and really look to open up purpose-driven facilities such as the one that's being proposed. So I look forward to, fielding, answering the questions that you may have about how we operate. I certainly have some very excellent members of my team who might be able to give a little more detail depending on what the question might be.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Ivy. Is anybody else from your organization speaking this evening?
They'll certainly speak if there's a question in their wheelhouse. They'll certainly speak on it in detail.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we'll open up the floor to questions. We're going to be starting with our elected officials. We have Assembly Member Bishot Hermelin here. I'd like to give her the opportunity to ask questions of the organization if she should have any.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm trying to get my video on, but it's a little bit slow. Can everybody hear me? Yes.
Yes,
okay,
I can.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, First Community Board 14 for having this hearing. It's certainly very important that we know what's going on in our community. And thank you, Erin from the city, from DSS, as well as Children's Rescue Fund for being here. First, I'd like to say that my name is Assembly Member Rodney Bishot Hermelin. I represent this community and been living here for some time. A little bit background of how we got here. When we were told that Kenilworth was sold and no longer being occupied by Brooklyn College Residence Hall, and there was an opportunity for the owner to work with the city in bringing a shelter. At that particular time, when we found out, we brought the concern to the community as it related to the provider who was going to be contracted to provide the shelter service, as well as the type of program. We didn't know what kind of program it was, what kind of population, were people going to be there for 2-3 days, the length of stay, and so forth. So, so we had this meeting with the community board members, the neighborhood members, with DSS in terms of what we would potentially like to see, and we had offered the idea of senior housing. We also were there were many of us who were sentiment to the issue around homelessness, and that we know that there is a need for shelter, and that we should not close our doors or turn our backs on people who are of need. However, we did make it known to the agency that there are a number of shelters around in the neighborhood already that has been popping up, opening up, and this would be among the number of shelters that we have. So as we were talking, we also talked about if we were to continue with the shelter idea, what kind of occupancy it would be. I think many of us were very open to families with children because we felt that it would be, a much more protected program with children, as well as wraparound services. We also wanted a supportive housing model that would position these families to get permanent housing. That was something that we did mention. So I know the agency has been talking to a number of different providers. There was one provider that we were very interested in because they are in the neighborhood, but we found out that the facility could not accommodate families. It could only accommodate single occupancy. Okay. So then I know DSS was looking and so forth. I did get a call not too long ago from DSS saying that the decision was made and Children Rescue Fund would come in and be the provider. This was kind of like a short window, and at the same time, there was members of the community who did reach out to us and said, hey, there was a notification that there's going to be this hearing here today to talk about it. So I know there's concerns. Of course, there's concerns on my end as well in terms of the population and the provider in terms of having experience in working in the Brooklyn neighborhood. I know the provider is doing some work have been providing services in the Bronx as well as Manhattan. Obviously Brooklyn is different, and with the single women occupancy, we just wanted to get a sense of how would that be launched and rolled out and would work in our community, knowing that we don't really necessarily have a single occupancy for women. So overall, in a nutshell, I do want to hear from the community in terms of the process. I was told that this was an RFP process, an open-end RFP process, and providers put in their RFP application, they get selected, and then the community get involved. And I guess from this point, this is where we're getting involved. Wanted to get a sense from the community more so because this is an RFP process and a provider was selected. Are we comfortable with this population, a single adult female, or is there an opportunity to still do family? I know that there will be major renovations that needs to be done. I don't know if the owner will want to invest in that type of capital, or is there still an opportunity for senior housing? I know we're probably not at that senior housing because the facility is not there, but with Children Rescue Fund, really, if you haven't worked in Brooklyn, I guess what would you be doing to get familiar? And to DSS, we have a number of shelters in our community. Again, do we need another one? So that's just the questions, but I'm really here to listen to the input from the community board members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. I wanted to offer the opportunity to Children's Rescue Fund or DSS to respond to the Assembly Member if they'd like to.
I'll keep it brief. In regards to shelters in the community, Department of Social Services currently operates one families with children location that's providing support to 48 families. And as part of the Turning the Tide plan, I know some are aware, the board and the electeds, maybe not the same representation of the community, but we have announced on the Duria Place shelter as well. Those are the locations, so 3 including this one, that the Department of Homeless Services operates in Community Board 14. In regards to the considerations, certainly want to hear from the community. As mentioned, the proposal that was rated and awarded from the Children's Rescue Fund is for single adult women at this location. What happens and is required as part of the RFP process is that the provider must demonstrate site control. Our contract is with the provider. They have the relationship with the landlord or the developer. And in this instance, they submitted a proposal that the landlord was on board with in terms of this particular population. But if, conversations with the community move forward, we can certainly reach out if a family population is more desirable here, and determine what, if anything, can be done with the landlord. We always need to make sure that there's site control as part of the RFP process, which Children's Rescue Fund did demonstrate in their response. In regards to the work that would be done with these women in terms of transitioning them back to permanent housing, getting them connected maybe to supportive housing or to a voucher so they can return to independent living. Maybe Orlando or Tanisha, if you want to speak a little bit about the social services that will be offered at the site, I think that would be helpful to be responding.
Hi. I'm sorry, Tahisha. Just I want to interject something here. So, and then she can speak about the services. I am acutely aware of the neighborhood where this shelter is going. I lived in Brooklyn for 10 years, attended Medgar Evers College. I love Brooklyn. So certainly I understand your concerns. The goal when we come to provide services anywhere is to integrate ourselves into the community. Certainly when we're looking at who is working at our facilities, we look to hire people in the facilities. Straight off the bat, we're setting aside a number of the jobs if the site moves forward for people in the community so that they do have a tie to what's going on and they're not just coming in from the outside. So certainly we do understand and we're here to be partners. Thank you. Tahisha?
Yes. Hi, once again, my name is Taisha Luhang. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Children's Rescue Fund. And as Erin mentioned earlier, the women who will be coming to Kenilworth will be women who are primarily from the community. The women are, they come in through 2 points of entry, and part of that, their quote unquote permanent place or, place of where they'll be residing for the most part is they're looking at last known addresses, and they're engaging with the women regarding their community and their places of worship and where their families are, and that's where they're placing the women. And so the women who will be at Kenilworth will primarily be from this community or the community surrounding the area. So the aim for Children's Rescue Fund is to integrate them back into the community successfully. We've been working with women for 28 years. As you know, most or over 90% of the heads of households of families with children's sites are women. And so we're deeply aware of the needs of the women. And so the services and the proposal that was rated and that was awarded was a thoughtful proposal that really looked to the critical needs of women and how can we holistically support them in moving on successfully. And so, in terms of, Assemblymember Bashad inquired of the services that are going to be on site, it will be wraparound services. We are looking at some of those core needs, such as housing and coordination of the services through the case manager, but we're also looking at substance use support. We're looking at mental health support through a psychiatric nurse and medical needs. And, many of our women that we have worked with over the years have significant medical needs that are unaddressed, and significant mental health needs that are unaddressed. And so we want to make sure that those are addressed in coordination with the family, of the women and the support networks that the women will either have already in place, or our primary goal is to integrate them with supports, with the community-based support, so that they're empowered to make good choices and good decisions on their behalf, and perhaps their larger family units. And so those are some of the services that will be on site. We'll also have a licensed practical nurse that will be on site, once again, really looking at the health and the mental health needs of the individual. For the women to move on successfully, we're looking at employment, and not only traditional employment, but non-traditional employment. We're looking at ways at vocational programs. We're looking at ways, or looking at resources that will be interesting to the women, that the women will want to engage in long term. And we're looking at simple things such as credit management. We're looking at simple things as cleaning up the credit reports, and not so simple. It's not so simple, especially following COVID, that everyone was deeply impacted. And so helping the woman to restart her path that she has chosen onto success. And that's our primary goal at Children's Rescue Fund. And that's what will be provided there. Orlando mentioned that, the staffing that will be on site will be hopefully members who are also members of the community, once again drawing on those strengths to plug the women back into their community. We're looking at integrative medicine. We're looking at a member before mentioned supportive housing. We're looking at supportive housing. CRF has a strong supportive housing policy that will really work with the members of the community within the individual, the women's sphere, and look to work with them in hopes of placing them permanently in a supportive housing entity that will keep them long term. So those are some of the services that we're hoping to provide on site. Anything specific you would like to ask?
Hello, hi. Good evening. This is Kenneth Mbonu with the Flatbush Junction bid. How are you all doing? I'm just curious, ma'am. You help me out here. This is a shelter that's supposed to be for single women, right? Is this women without kids or women with kids?
Women without children.
So, okay.
Can I just clarify? The women might have children, but they won't be placed. The women are seeking shelter as a single adult.
Okay,
So
so the facility is for single women. That's women without kids. Looking at your website, I see you guys have.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I did want to, you are a pre-registered speaker, and I wanted to give you the opportunity and all of the time that you need during the period that we'll be having the pre-registered speakers speak. I just wanted to finish the elected officials, and then we can move on to the board members, and then you will have an opportunity. I am sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Was there anything, I'm sorry, was there anything else that you wanted to add, Aaron Drinkwater or the representatives from the Children Rescue Fund?
Not at this time. Sorry, I was just responding to the speaker's question, but I can hold my response.
Thank you.
Madam
no-
Chair, I just
Yes.
wanted to say that Councilmember Farah Lewis, she provided a statement. I don't know if I don't have it, but she did provide a statement. I don't know if it was read or will it be read, but
Her representative is here. I was just going to ask Sabrina DeJuice whether or not she had comments to enter into the record. The representative for Councilmember Farah Lewis, did you want to go ahead and read the statement or enter comments in from the council member? You are muted if you are trying to speak. Okay. I'll send you a message in the chat and we'll come back directly around you. I'm sorry, Assembly Member, that did you want to add any comments on her behalf other than that?
no, I think we have the same issues, but we're good. I'm good. Thank you.
I'll come back around to her after we take questions from board members and see if she's gotten back onto the line. That being said, let's move on to questions from board members. Please raise your hand if you have a question. First hand is from Barton Prasant, board member.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. And thank you all for the presentation. I guess I'd like to learn a little bit more about why Campbell, which was the organization that was going to be operating the family facility, had not ultimately been selected for this. I do understand that maybe family facilities might be slightly more expensive to build and maintain, but they're an organization that has extremely deep roots in this neighborhood and wouldn't take any time to come up to speed. So if I could just hear a little bit more about that from DSS, I'd appreciate it.
So Campbell had submitted a proposal. We had met over the summer with our elected partners and some representatives who I see here tonight from the neighborhood group. Some concerns were raised. Ultimately, I believe that they no longer had site control. And we moved forward recognizing that this was a location that we believed to be well suited for a shelter to be located, to work with other providers to have them submit an RFP response to be rated and approved.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I mean, I will just note, Campbell does run other facilities within the agency. The 47th shelter, the one that we just most recently opened in North Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. They're also a home-based provider. So I do concur in terms of, them being a, suitable organization.
Well, actually, just since you mentioned it, I believe also Campbell already has experience with single women facilities, and I don't believe CRF has run any.
Sorry, I was having a little trouble with the mute button. Campbell does have single women facilities. The proposal that Children's Rescue Fund that they put forward was rated and reviewed by our committee, and they were deemed eligible and awarded the proposal at the site.
Okay, I mean, I used to be a shelter monitor for the Coalition for the Homeless, and I have a sense that there's very different vibe, let us say, in a single women's shelter versus a family shelter. And considering the location of where this one is going to be located, it just seems like there's the possibility for some issues to arise.
And we look forward to hearing from the community tonight and then working to address concerns that are raised. So appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Hi, I do want to just highlight that Children's Rescue Fund, yes, we do not have single women facilities, but we have been operating adult family facilities, and these are adults without children. We have facilities with adults without children, so we are very familiar with the different experiences of adults without children versus families with children. And once again, just because of our our experience with families with children, we are also very much so aware of the needs of women. And though many of the women none of the women at Kenilworth will have any children, many of them may already be mothers. And so we will be working with them to address those, any concerns that they may have. And we really will be working to help reintegrate them back into the community. But with that said, Kenilworth will be working with the community regarding any concerns that the community may have. We will establish a community advisory board where, we will be partnering with the community to address any concerns or take in any recommendations that they may have or any resources that the community may have and want to share. Because I know, all of you are here as members who are concerned of the neighbors, of our own neighbors in New York who are experiencing homelessness, and we want to partner with you to ameliorate those concerns. So we'll be working with you. CRF has a good neighbor policy where we work with our communities that our facilities are in, and we really hope to partner with you, not only at the community advisory board, but also becoming a member of the community board as well.
Hi, I would also like to add that while CRF has not had that direct experience, I personally am a social worker with over 30 years of shelter experience, and I have operated for another organization a number of shelters for single women. We also have a number of staff working with families that also have experience working in single shelters. So we do have a level of expertise that I think would be suitable for this site and would certainly complement the needs of the women that will be coming to the shelter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question from board member Glenn Wallen.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is there an age range for these single women? And the second one, you say they're mostly from the community, but that's kind of nebulous. Is there a minimum percentage that you're going to take out of Community Board 14 in the local community? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I'll take the first one, which is an age range. So this is for single adult women. So this would not be for minors. We do have a handful of shelters that operate for young adults. However, any adult over the age of 18 would be able to be placed here, again, depending on the particularities of the individual's case and how they will be best served by one of our program shelters. If an individual has severe mental health diagnoses and are in need of a higher level of care, this would not be the shelter assignment for them. The question in terms of placement from individuals from this community. The Department of Homeless Services under the Turning the Tide plan does make every effort to place individuals close to their connections of care. This means if their last known address is from the community board, a location within that community board. And then we sort of, like concentric circles spread out beyond that. We consider this a borough-based plan, the Turning the Tide plan. I also want to make mention of the fact that it's not a one-for-one. There are individuals who, by virtue of the type of placement that they require, they might have mobility issues that might not be served by this location. They might have a history of domestic violence and are precluded from being sheltered in the borough of Brooklyn. There's a number of criteria and circumstances that are taken into account when we're placing individuals in shelter. We also know that there are times where placements are made and it turns out that the individual who has been placed in shelter might need a higher level or a different level of care. And we're able to transfer those clients to a shelter that would be better suited to meet their needs. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is there a likelihood, let's say, that the majority of these women are going to be, say, 20 to 40 or 40 to 60, or is there some sense of what the greater majority is likely to be like? Thank you.
Got it. I don't have the demographic breakdown with me. I can try to see it if I can get it before the end of the meeting. But as of last night, we had approximately, I want to say like 4,000 single adult women within the shelter system. Our daily census is posted on the Department of Homeless Services website. But let me see if I can get you an age breakdown.
Thank you.
Next question is from board member Talisha Sanville.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, is there, it was mentioned earlier that CRF runs facilities in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. Are there other facilities within our neighborhood? I apologize if you mentioned it before, but.
Not operated by CRF. We do have two facilities. One that we announced as Turning the Tide plan at Duria Place. Then there is a Families with Children location also within the bounds of the community board.
And I also had another question. You know, without diving too deep into the information that was listed on our community board website, I was just wondering if there are any stats on how often shelters like this have changeover, and is the community able to sort of get a demographic breakdown to sort of piggyback on Glenn's question? Are we going to receive a breakdown of some sort about who's actually located in this shelter or general demographics without submitting private information?
Thank you for the question. So I'm not going to be able to get the age breakdown or the age of the 4,000, excuse me, single adult women in our shelter system, the age range across that 4,000 individuals. We can certainly follow up. But thank you for the questions. And the type of information that you're talking about is really the type of discussion that occurs in the community advisory board meetings that will be held once the shelter opens. Part of the work that's done by Yuri Sanchez, our Brooklyn community, our Brooklyn Borough Liaison, her along with CRF, really work to create the CABs to foster dialogue with the community and with the shelter to talk about these types of things, to talk about the work that CRF is doing, how many placements are made, how many women are getting connected to employment, the type of housing engagements that are going on at the shelter. That's the type of information that we readily share in the CABs because we recognize that it's helpful in terms of just building the relationship with the community. The other piece of information that I think is important is you asked sort of how long individuals tend to reside at the shelter. Within our work, and this is tracked in the mayor's management report, it can be found online. The length of stay currently for single adults is a little bit over a year. So, that is the work that CRF is doing to connect individuals to the programs and services that they need, working with housing specialists, again, to transition back to permanent housing.
Next question is from Greg Alvarez, board member.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Two questions, if I may. More just sort of getting understanding of nuts and bolts of daily operations. So first off, I just had a question. Since this was a former Brooklyn College residence, just trying to get a sense if we can have a comparison between the number of residents that were accommodated during the time of Brooklyn College occupancy versus the I guess it's 200 that intend to be the occupancy when converted over. Do we have those? Do we have that comparison?
I don't have that comparison, but let me just take the opportunity. Prior to the shelter opening, we're required to meet the standards set forth by our state oversight entity. That's the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, as well as the Department of Buildings and FDNY. So we are required to comply with those agencies in terms of enforcement. And then the standards set forth in terms of the operation of the shelter are also laid out in a number of court settlements. Mr. Barden earlier talked about being a shelter monitor. We have regular inspections from our court-appointed monitor, the Legal Aid Society and Coalition for the Homeless. And so there's a series of checks and balances in terms of that work. But I can see if I have access to the number of individuals housed when it was operating, as I don't have that with me here tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I'd appreciate that, just because just to sort of get a sense in terms of understanding of just your traffic in terms of how many folks will be occupying as opposed to what previous circumstances were. And then my other question would be, could you give us a more specific idea of in terms of staffing at any particular in any particular shift, let's say a day shift, night shift, in terms of what kind of staff will be on site in terms of job description, responsibilities, and then the number of folks who will be administering the facility on any given day.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll turn this over to CRF to take.
Regarding staffing, we will have, I mentioned earlier, we will have a psychiatric nurse. We'll have a licensed practical nurse. We'll also have CASACs on staff. We'll have our case managers, housing specialists, employment specialists, and social workers makes up our key clinical staff. We'll also have a contracted psychiatrist that will provide oversight regarding medication management, regarding any short-term psychotherapy needs. We'll also have our security on staff. Security will be on staff 24 hours a day. We will have staff who are keen to do the immediate engagement once they come on site. In terms of additional security, we'll also have our security cameras. Is approximately 160, 170 security cameras that will make up a part of the site, with redundancy in recording, so that the recordings are available if there's any incidents to the police. So
and also
on site at all times.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I also would like to add that the staff will be on site through the early evening hours, and certainly on Saturdays. So when we talk about having a social worker, case manager, housing, CASACs, it's not only 9 to 5, it's through the early evening hours and on Saturdays, working with those individuals on an ongoing basis. Some people may work part-time, so we want to be available to them. So the schedule offers a lot of flexibility. And I'd like to add that there is supervision both on the social work side. On the social service side, we have supervisors who supervise directly the case managers, the employment specialist, the housing specialist. We have a licensed clinical social worker who will supervise the social workers, and they will all be reporting to the program director, who has overall management responsibility of the day-to-day operations of the program. Our residential aides and our security staff will be supervised by shift supervisors, and they will report directly to an operations director, who will also report to the program director.
Thank you. Next question is from Carl Henry Cesar, board member.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brown, and thank you to the elected officials and other representatives here from Children's Rescue Fund and the city as well. I have a few questions, I guess, that I would consider procedural. So the first one is, for this conversation, is this a conversation about determining if the population for this homeless shelter will be single women, or is it that that decision has already been made and this is just getting the community's feedback on it? That's my first question before I go to the second one.
Sure, thank you for the question. So the discussion tonight is concerning Children's Rescue Fund awarded proposal, which is a single adult women site. We do, where possible, want to, really work with the community. And when I say where possible, we always want to work with the community. We want to get feedback and input, but we also have the legal and moral obligation in terms of making sure that we're meeting our right to shelter mandates. So if every community were to say to us, well, we would like a families with children shelter, we're going to find ourselves in a predicament of needing to have shelter appropriate for single adult women, for single adult men, and other populations. So it is sort of a both and as part of the conversation. We're discussing the awarded proposal, but we want to be tuned into the community feedback and see if adjustments can be made and be a good partner. But we also have to look at our system-wide requirements as we're considering what's shared with us tonight.
Got you. Thank you for that clarity. So then that ties into my second question. So this is just a thought exercise. Let's say, the community's feedback and everything else determines, yes, the approved contract can go as intended with the single women in that facility. My next question is, what would then be the proposed timeline for opening the facility? Is this something where, if everything went as people expect, we'd be looking at a fall 2023, 2024? What would we be looking at?
Right now, under the current proposal, we have a spring 2022 projected open date. We say projected because of some of the approvals that I talked about. There could be delays in construction and otherwise, but that's what our projection is for the moment.
Gotcha. And so then the next follow-up question is, so then same thought exercise, if it did open spring 2022, then would that mean that spring 2022, there are 200 single women who are in that facility, or it just means spring 2022, the first X number of women would be there, but it would take time before all of the staff and all of the people were there?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So when we open shelters, they're opened in a fully staffed capacity, but but as we populate the shelter, it's done bit by bit. We don't just bring in 200 single adult women. The capacity is built up over time.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next question is from Shahid Khan, board member.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, because this is the beginning of the project, so that's why there is a lot of questions, everybody. I just want to know what is the size of the building when you are constructing 200 single woman apartment. So this is single room apartment, double room apartment, how many floors? So when you occupied 200, so they're parking inside, outside. So what is the management of all these things? How you can create car parking inside, outside? Maybe their relatives come to see those ladies. So this is just like a working woman hostel or professional woman hostel. So if you kindly explain the situation.
Sure, thank you. I'll try to hit on everything, and then I'm going to turn some of this over to Children's Rescue Fund to respond. So individuals who will be located at the shelter, they might be unemployed, they might be employed. We do know that there is some population within our shelters who are employed. They're just not earning enough income to be able to pay the difference between, wages and rent. Some women who are unemployed, will be working with CRF on job skills training and things like that to work to, again, transition back to permanent housing. As I mentioned, all of the women will be placed here as single adults, meaning that there will not be anybody else on their case or in their household. It doesn't, however, mean that these individuals aren't, mothers and sisters and friends and aunts outside of, their temporary experiences as being homeless. In regard to the size of the building, I'll let the CRF team talk a little bit about that. But what I'll mention again is just the requirement that the city abides by the requirements from the other agencies. So Office of Temporary Disability Assistance has regulations set forth in state regulation as to what the shelter's physical plant must include. Similarly, the court settlements also lay out very detailed guide as to what must entail at the shelter. And then similarly, making sure that there are the approvals by the Department of Building and FDNY. But I can let Orlando talk a little bit about the layout of the building.
Thank you.
I'm going to defer to Tahisha to talk about the layout of the building in detail, but remember that this building was used as congregate housing for college students. So a number of these rooms had multiple occupants in it. I believe in our plan, each of the women will have their own room. Tahisha?
Hi, yes. So this site was a residence, and not only for Brooklyn College, but all of the colleges in the surrounding area. So this was a residence hall for mainly persons who short-term stay. So yes, many of the rooms can accommodate more than one individuals, as they were bunk beds that were in the rooms. Each of the women at Kenilworth will for CRF will not share a room. They will have their own rooms. Which will be important for the women and her sense of self and comfort, and so that was also part of the thoughtfulness in terms of the reasons why we wanted to partner with this site. And the site is about 60,000 square feet. There is no parking on site. It's Brooklyn, so everyone will have to jockey for parking, as we all have to do. But there is, there will be dining available. We won't be cooking for the women. We'll be providing hot meals that will be that a RFP, the procurement process is out for a suitable vendor to provide hot and healthy, fresh meals each day. So we will be providing food there, and the women will eat on site. So in terms of how the operation of the facility will operate, similar to how the facility has always operated in that manner, and what you're used to.
So what is the approximately the flooring, eight floor building? So what you have the idea?
So yes, it's approximately 8 stories with residence units all the way up. And so that the women will be, approximately 200 women will be from units, floors 1 through 8.
So is there any additional for the staffing residential area also?
The staff won't live on site, but there will be 24 hours staffing, and the staffing will be dispersed throughout, strategically placed throughout the building. So the staffing will be on each floor to support the women on each of the floors.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next question is Florencia Chang-Agueda, board member.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chairperson Brown. I have a couple of questions. Just piggybacking off what Tanisha you just said, that there'll be food deliveries. How many times a day will there be food deliveries? And why not have a kitchen staff?
I think it's about once each day the food will be delivered for the following day. So usually in the evening the food will be delivered fresh for the breakfast and the lunch, and then the dinner will come, and then that's how it will be done. In terms of cooking, I think it would be, we're just thinking in terms of the most efficient and healthy way to ensure that the women are provided with healthy and safe food. And so we just wanted to make sure that was, something that we would, contract out to make sure that we provide it daily, and it won't be a huge or onerous situation where, we're cooking and trying to, make meals for 200 women every day, at minimum 3 times a day.
So following up on that, then, will that mean that there'll be additional refuse to be collected if 3 meals are being provided each day, that they're probably in disposable containers? So
Yes.
will that force more garbage buildup?
So yes, so we'll have a recycling program. So yes, there will be garbage, but we will also endeavor to take out the garbage. I think the interesting thing about Kenilworth is that it straddles two streets, at Farragut and Kenilworth, and that they have opposite garbage days. So far, that's what the research is showing. They have opposite garbage days, and so garbage will be going out every day based on the side that is picking up for that day.
Okay. And so my 2 other questions are, and then I yield, is how will the shelter be populated? Are the women being referred, and from where? And I'll just say the final sentence. If the community's input is deemed necessary, why are we knowing about this at the 9th hour? And
Thank you for those sorry.
You can go ahead, Erin.
Okay, thank you for the questions. So in regard to the community input, we, as part of procurement, are able to talk about proposals once they are rated and awarded. In regards to conversations with the community, every year we do send a letter to the community board as well as our elected officials requesting sites that are in the district that could be considered for shelter. To your point, we recognize that folks in the community do know their community best in terms of making suggestions as to locations that might be well suited for shelter. So we do make an effort to make requests of the community board and our elected officials to get potential site locations. But in terms of talking about specific proposals, as part of procurement, we need to be mindful of that and are only able to speak about a proposal once that is rated and approved. I think you had one more question, and I apologize, it slipped my mind. So would you mind just repeating it, please?
How will you populate the shelter?
Yes, thank you, apologies. So as mentioned, the individuals will come through a point of intake. For women, they're able to go to intake in the Bronx or Brooklyn. From there, we're able to learn a little bit about the individual. We try to divert them, see if there's an opportunity for them to be to remain in permanent housing. But if not, we work to connect them with a program shelter that's going to best suit their needs. We also, with the opening of new shelters, do look across our shelter system to see if there are individuals whose last known address is in this community district and or nearby, and give those individuals an opportunity to be relocated to this to the new facility, recognizing that being connected to their anchors of life, whether that be family, friends, religious institutions, work, employment, doctors, can be beneficial in that progression from being housed in shelter and then the transition to permanent housing.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take questions from two more board members, and then we're going to move on to the public. And then if we have time, I will circle back to the other board members that have questions that have already spoken. So next question is going to be from Ann Gaudette, who's a board member, and then Darlene Bowers, board member.
Thank you very much, Joanne Brown, Chairwoman. Thank you very much for the presentation to both Children's Relief as well as from Erin Drinkwater. I have 3 questions, and I'd just like to put them out and ask if you could answer. They'll probably coalesce. So when you were speaking about the daily breakdown and the weekly breakdown, so I'm curious what a typical day would look like for somebody who is not currently working. Do they have to leave the facility? What types of job training, financial counseling, how would that be staggered throughout? And if you could speak about your jobs training programs. And additionally, I think I heard this correctly, but I'd just like you to clarify that Monday through Friday from morning until evening, there are support, professional and paraprofessional support, as well as security. In the later evenings through the night and Saturday evenings through Sunday, it's just security that is on site. Is that correct? And those are my 3 questions. Thank you so much for the presentation.
So I'll start with the DHS related questions and then turn it back over to the policy of the agency that we require our providers is that individuals are able to stay in the shelter during the daytime hours. So under the prior administration, individuals would have to leave first thing in the morning. There is a curfew. All of the women will need to be inside the shelter by 10 p.m. This also has to do with our vacancy control in managing a large system and needing to know where vacant beds are so that we can place individuals who need a bed placement for the evening. So we have a curfew for that. Individuals who are working and have non-traditional business hours would be able to receive a pass, so that way they're able to come and go and be outside of the shelter after curfew, but still come back in when they're complete with their work shift. Similarly, in the morning, there's not a requirement for individuals to leave the shelter, although it certainly is encouraged because we want individuals out looking for housing, looking for employment, going to medical appointments, going to school, whatever their sort of external to the shelter activities might be. But I'll let Tanisha talk about the on-site programming and the staffing that's available.
Angela, you can take this one.
Sure. So while they are in shelter during the day, not only will they be meeting with the case managers and the social workers, but we will have what we call employment specialists on site, which is individuals whose job is to not only assist the women in building a resume and teaching them how to do a job search, but also assessing what is realistic for them in terms of employment and job readiness. And based on that work with the women, then they will help them and guide them in determining, what is the next best step for them. For many of the women, an entry-level position is usually what they're looking for because they've been out of the workforce for some time, and reintroducing them to the workforce is something that takes part early on when they come into the shelter. The employment specialist will also work with them on workshops on how to interview, how to dress for success, time management, money management, helping them resolve questions and concerns about getting out to the workforce, getting out to the world of work, for many of them for the first time in a long time. We will also be partnering with providers that do specifically job training. We have a linkage agreement with an organization called Hope, and they do non-traditional job training and employment. We have a linkage agreement with, the name just escaped me. But we do have linkage agreements with other larger organizations that their focus is employment and job readiness. Through those partnerships, we help the women, we bring them on site, and they collaborate with us in helping find employment to the women. And in addition to that, the employment specialists are always, part of their job is to go and provide and establish relationships with either local community employers or employers that like a supermarket, or employers that have a borough, a citywide or a borough-wide. And the employment specialists really collaborate across the organization, and they support one another in letting them know where are the areas that are employing our clients.
May I chime in? Good evening. I am Nixon P. I'm the program director. I will be the program director for that site, Kenilworth. Just to piggyback on my colleagues, what is very important to note is that every individual that walks through the door, we will create what is called an independent living plan. So therefore, we will meet that person where they are and work with that individual to build that individual in the different wraparound services that we have. 7 days a week. So social services is divided into two, from Sunday to Thursday, from Tuesday to Saturday. So therefore, there will always be a level of support on the social service end. Clearly, we know the curfew is at 10 p.m. So we will have a late night between 7 and 8 p.m., maybe 2 times a week for social services. Why? So we can meet everyone where they are. Someone might be working late or someone might be working on a weekend, but we will always have service readily available for everyone.
Thank you for that. Ms. Bowers, board member, please, one simple question. If you could just limit it to one question. We must move on to hear from the public before they have to leave this meeting.
Yes, it's a very simple question. Is CRF currently operating a facility this size? And if not, what is your typical size facility?
The short answer to that is yes. We currently operate a 199 unit facility in Manhattan. We do have smaller programs. We have operated larger programs. At one point, we were operating a cluster program that exceeded 500 families. So yes, we have operated large programs prior.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bowers, for your brevity. I appreciate it. I'm going to move on to our pre-registered attendees. I have some items to read into the record that were sent by email. The first one is from Alexandra Baltarzuk. She is a community resident. She has written that she is opposed to this project. And she writes, to house 200 homeless single people so close to Brooklyn College seems to be a thoughtless fit. This location already has created a bad reputation for Brooklyn College internationally due to the assaults perpetrated upon students of the college when this location was a dormitory. This move would further diminish the appeal of Brooklyn College. I feel it would be much better to convert the building into permanent housing for homeless families. She also added into the chat that there is concern about the high school. Please let me just go to this. She wants to emphasize her concern for the high school and college students who are located so near the shelter and may not have the experience at their young age to process the presence of so many homeless women in a way that is advantageous to their personal development. The next item I will read into the record is from David Kelsey. He is a community resident. He is opposed to the project. His submitted testimony is Aaron Drinkwaters at her department's track record on shelters and dealing with public concerns, such as the Lucerne is highly problematic, even hateful, and he adds a link to a New York Post article. The next item I will read into the record is from Chris Kessler, community resident, and his position is opposed to the project. He submitted no comments. The next pre-registered speaker was Assemblymember Rodney's Bichot Hermelin. If she has nothing else to add, I will move on to the next speaker. The next person who is registered is DeVita Brothers. Is this person here, DeVita Brothers? Next person is Diane Reinhardt from South Midwood Residents Association. Diane Reinhardt, are you available, or would you like to?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi.
ma'am.
Hi. I want to go back to some questions about the actual accommodations that these women are going to be given, particularly in light of, I know a little bit about the structure and design of the Brooklyn College dorm. So my first question is, someone referenced that each woman would have her own room. So part of the question is, that room is a dorm-sized bedroom. So I'm wondering, is that the only private space that that person will have? Which connects to, are these women going to be asked to share bathrooms? Are there any food preparation areas, refrigerators or microwaves or anything like that for them? And is that in a shared space? And given that the structure of the dorm is generally 2 bedrooms, one on either side of what was a common bathroom, why not accord with the residents the respect of giving them a suite with a private bathroom and maybe some other private space, not only in terms of respecting their sense of privacy, but in a time when we're not free of COVID and Brooklyn COVID rates are high, to move 200 women into a facility and ask them to share bathrooms with strangers who may be rotating strangers doesn't seem to me very respectful of their health. So I have a lot of questions about this design of 200 women moving into this space and the kind of and the quality of the quality of the accommodations that they're being given. That's it.
So thank you. So I can start, and then can add some additional information. The single system across the DHS's portfolio is a congregate style shelter. We do have single and double room occupancies, that we've used in commercial hotels for a variety of reasons. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, these locations could house employed or employable individuals. They could house individuals who had mobility or other reasonable accommodations that could be accommodated in a single or double occupancy location. But the DHS single adult shelter system on the whole is a congregate shelter system where anywhere from 4 to upwards of 16 individuals are housed in a particular room. As was mentioned at this site, the location for each, the room for each individual would be different. I'll let CRF talk to that. But I wanted to address some of the concerns particularly raised as it relates to COVID-19 and the work that the agency has done for the better part of 18 months and the work that we continue to do moving forward. We took immediate action back in March of 2020 to ensure that individuals who had COVID-like symptoms were immediately isolated and quarantined. We then moved, starting with seniors, into commercial hotel rooms, and ultimately moved 9,000 individuals into commercial hotels in single or double room occupancies in order to protect their health and well-being. Over the course of time, we were able to provide regular testing to individuals who were residing in shelter. And then in April of this year, we worked to ensure that we had a robust vaccination plan. DSS opened our own sites for clients and staff to be vaccinated at while we awaited the approval of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which then with that vaccine, we were able to go mobile, making sure that clients at the location that they were residing had access to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We continue to vaccinate our clients, building on top of the mobile testing that we put into place at our congregate shelter locations. We have mobile vaccination opportunities for clients to make sure that they're getting vaccinated. We have been working also on the booster shots. Information is changing regularly. There was some time ago where the Johnson & Johnson vaccine hadn't yet been approved for booster. It's now been approved. We're working to make sure that our clients are aware and eligible, excuse me, not eligible, but they have the information so that way they're able to go out and get that booster shot. So we are working very hard to make sure that we're operating in an environment that is safe and healthy for everybody, while also responding to the pandemic as more information is known. I'll turn it over to Children's Rescue Fund for some additional information about the layout, recreation space, and dining, which was part of your question. Thank you.
So yes, the women will have their own rooms, and that's their primary private space. They will share, just 2 women will be sharing 1 bathroom, which, you know, is very different than the general style that Erin mentioned earlier. There will be industrial refrigerators, industrial warmers. There's also microwaves available for the women whenever they would like. There will be, you know, food available. There's recreation and dining available. And as you know, one of the neat things about this building is that there's a courtyard in the back of the building that allows for the women to go outside and have, you know, and play, you know, basketball or, you know, to, you know, just have fresh air that won't necessarily have them outside the facility on you know, Farragut or Kenilworth, but they'll be able to be outside safely in the back.
Thank you very much. I have an additional question from our first registered speaker, Alexandra Baltarzik. Just give me a moment so I can find it in the chat. I apologize. One moment, almost there. The question is, who owns the building and who has the underlying mortgage for this building?
The owners of the building is New Brooklyn LLC. They're the ones who I know who has the underlying mortgage.
Okay, thank you. I have several members here from the South Midwood Resident Association. It would be great if we can consolidate you into one speaker. I know Florence Valentino had some questions in the chat. I have another member, Pam Brown, farther down the list. I was wondering if we can consolidate everything to Miss Brown further on. So I'll put you 2 together. And next registered speaker is going to be Kenneth, Madumbu from the Junction Bid. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting.
Okay, thank you. Hello all. So some of my questions, original questions have been answered. My concern was the experience with the organization in working with single women, even though there is some synergy between, you know, working with families and women with children, it's still not the same thing. But that is, you know, just concerned that DSS would would pick that organization first, and not, reflect on the other companies or organizations that have some experience, more experience with that. The other thing was with reference to the data. It is, since we manage the commercial district on Flatbush Ave, it is very important that that we get to know the age range of the women, so we could start talking to the local businesses in that area, maybe to begin to identify products and services that could help assist those women in that age range. And also we have to look at it from a business attraction type, business attraction perspective as well. My third question is around parking. That used to be a student facility that's now been converted into an adult single woman housing facility. Parking there is a big issue. Not talking about the students. I mean, when it was a student facility, none of those students had cars. But even with Brooklyn College looking to open up formally, there's going to be parking issues there already that are going to be challenged. Is DSS talking to DOT to allow for available parking spaces to support this new intake? Thank you very much.
There's no request for additional parking spaces at this location.
Okay.
Though we do welcome your partnership in providing resources to the women who will reside at Kenilworth. So we definitely will be partnering with the business improvement districts in the community to reach out to bring your resources on site or to introduce you to interested residents and vice versa, in order to build that relationship once again with the aim of integrating the women back into the community successfully. So thank you so much. We look forward to your partnership.
We certainly, with the Community Advisory Board, often work with local businesses, sometimes many of whom will sit on the cab. So that's another opportunity for ongoing engagement and dialogue about the site.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next pre-registered speaker I have is Lisa Derrick. She's from Assemblymember Bishop Hermelin's office. I'll move on unless there's additional comments from that office. The next pre-registered speaker is Monica Beyer. I don't have an affiliation or whether they're a resident. Monica, would you like to speak? Monica, you're still muted if you're trying to speak. Okay. Moving on, next registered speaker is Pam Brown, South Midwood Resident Association.
I'm now unmuted, if I might. I'm sorry. I sent a question. There was someone who said that there were going to be about 150 security cameras installed. I'm a resident of South Midwood and on the executive board. And I'm just wondering what concerns there are that would make the people who are going to be dealing with the facility think that 150 security cameras would be needed. I also have some concerns in that the information that I was forwarded from the community board suggested that this is the suggestion was that a lot of the people who will be the women who will be in the facility may have rather substantial problems with addiction of varying sorts. And while it sounds as if you really have excellent coverage in general for any sort of need, what sort of contacts have been made with emergency providers should that be required? Things do happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes it's very important for the fire department, EMS, other services to be available and understand that the facility they're being asked to come to, you know, what exactly that is, that it isn't a regular apartment house or a private home. So if someone could answer any of those, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. We do work. Sorry, I heard some feedback. Sorry. We do work with the local precinct to make sure that they're aware of our presence in the community. So those relationships are made prior to the shelter opening. In regards to the security cameras, part of the security work is done. It depends on the particular sight lines within a building, staircases. We want to make sure that, you know, there is coverage, so that way security and social services staff are able to respond. Security cameras are one element as part of many elements in terms of the shelter layout at, in terms of the security layout at the shelter. So it is additive to the in-person staff who are on site, being able to provide additional information to be able to respond to anything that might occur within the shelter.
Thank you.
Yes, just as Erin mentioned, the building is kind of a interesting building, and so the sight lines are, you know, cut off due to certain corners of how the building, just the design of the building, and just to ensure health and safety, we want to just make sure that all areas are covered, and so that we are responsive at all times. In terms of the concerns regarding any substance use issues, all of our security staff all of our staff will be trained in the DHS opioid prevention program, and you know, there will be a champions on each shift to be responsive to make sure that training is ongoing of the opioid prevention programs. And so that's the aim, but also we'll be partnering with mobile crisis units in the areas, the local hospitals, to ensure that if there's ever a need, that they're responsive.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Next registered speaker is Pam Brown. Pam Brown.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I've read over the documents about the layout of the in-house services, which sounds, you know, energetic and positive, etc. However, we all know that the shelter cannot operate in a vacuum. There are so many other dynamics that will play out here. So what input do you see the community playing here that gives us some kind of oversight? Because again, tonight we're getting a lot of information, but this is the first time we're hearing it and trying to digest it. So we really want to know what's been laid out as far as the community playing a role in this new shelter for women.
Great question, thank you. So part of our ongoing work is setting up the community advisory board, where information is exchanged from both parties, right? So from folks in the neighborhood, from business owners, school principals, these are all the types of people who sit on community advisory boards in the groups that we have at other shelters across the city. This is information where the community is able to come to the provider, be able to come to DHS and say, here are the things that we think are working really well. You know, we want to partner with you around the holidays. We want to do welcome kits for the women. Here are the things that aren't going so well. There's, you know, loitering in front of the building. We're worried about curfew. These are the opportunities to hear directly from the community and be able to build that feedback loop. So that way we're being responsive. The other thing that's available is making sure that the community board, that folks in the community have an on-site contact that they're able to reach if there are, you know, issues that are emerging. So that way the provider can be responsive and address the issues as they come up.
And how will you also assess how things are working or not working? What's the process of assessing how things are working out or not working out at this shelter?
Yeah, so part of the feedback loop in regards to the Community Advisory Board, but also our program administrators and DHS staff work regularly with our providers to make sure that they are adhering to their requirements with the contract, making sure that we're looking at things like housing placements, working to get folks connected to employment and those sorts of things that were discussed in terms of like the social programs at the shelter.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to give one more opportunity. The next pre-registered speaker is from Councilmember Lewis's office, Sabrina Jiju. It seems she has left the meeting. I just wanted to give her a last call. I have Soleil Griffin from Assemblymember Bichotte Harmelин's office. Next pre-registered speaker is Yuri Sanchez. She's our liaison. And then lastly, from Brooklyn College, Zunira Ahmed. And then board member Florence Valentino, also from the South Midwood Resident Association. Florence, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make a couple of comments related to some of the conversation. The first thing is you state that, in fact, you are trying to engage the community in this process. And the first thing that comes to mind is, why are we in South Midwood just discovering this now? We found this out a couple of days ago, and we had an executive board meeting on Monday at which we discussed some of the issues. Remember that we have had a history of being burned not so very long ago. And so this sort of is an echo of that experience. And I have to say, it leaves a bad taste. I actually live about a block and it's a few steps away from this facility. It is a very difficult corner, regardless of how you present it. And you talk about sanitation trucks and you talk about food delivery trucks. The street is very narrow and it merges with a commercial strip, which on any given morning is extremely busy, not only with vehicles, but with school buses. So it is, we already have major vehicle blocks because of this. I'd like to ask you, have you notified the residents of Amersfoort, Kenilworth, and East 26th Street? How about the little school that is directly across from your facility? Have you engaged with the pastor of that church? I mean, the issues that we had experienced with the proposal for Campbell and why they were denied it seem to be anew with this group, and yet you're going forward with it. And I find that, you know, the time to fix the problems is before you open, not after. You know, there's going to be issues, and I don't think that you've really looked at the problems that are going to present themselves in terms of, you're talking about parking. We have no place to park right now. There are some really major issues. In addition to the college, there are elementary school, and the children use these streets to go to these schools. There is a lot of concern about that you haven't addressed. I mean, I understand you have a wish list and you're hoping to present it in a very favorable light, but I think that if we really are going to be honest with what's going on for the neighborhood, I think we have to look at some of the dark side of this. So I'd like your reaction to my question. Did you notify the residents? Have you reached out to the church?
And thank you for the questions. So part of our official procedure on notification is notifying our local elected officials and the community board, and then working with those individuals in terms of getting this exact type of feedback that you're talking about. So I believe that you have Yuri's email. If you'd like to email Yuri so she can follow up and have these conversations, that's why we really value these discussions, because we're able to hear back from the community about folks that we should be talking with. I believe you were a part of the Zooms over the summer where we were talking about the site. If it wasn't you, I apologize. You do look a lot like somebody who was on the Zoom. But these are the types of dialogues that really help us in terms of making sure that folks in the area are aware of the proposal, and that we're able to address some of the concerns. So I do appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from District Manager Sean Campbell.
Thank you, and thanks to DHS and to Children's Rescue Fund for being here. I also really want to thank Yuri Sanchez from DHS because she's always so responsive and helpful. And I kind of want to address Florence's question too in terms of timing. By the time we got this notice and then we were able to set a date with DHS, it was a really quick turnaround in terms of getting this public hearing together. And we're open to follow-up meetings as well, because the choice was hurry up and do it and rush people, or wait a whole nother month and then it looked like we wouldn't, we look less transparent than we're striving to be. So we will circle back on whether or not another meeting would be useful for this community. I do want to follow up on a question about the landlord, because I Googled New Brooklyn LLC, and LLCs are notoriously hard to find and pin down. We had, the prior applicant was going to buy the building and make over $1 million investment in adding kitchens in order to accommodate families. And then suddenly it switched hands and New Brooklyn LLC, whoever they are, is the landlord. If it's the same landlord, but now under an LLC, that would be truly alarming, because the landlord for the dorms was notorious for locking students out with no process. So I'd like more information on New Brooklyn LLC, what else they own, and then I'm going to look on the DOB website and make sure that those buildings are maintained, because this community district actually is second in the city for the number of serious housing code violations per 1,000 units. So we didn't want the applicant agency to have to put up with a landlord that wasn't fixing where their clients live. And then I just want to express a concern. I should also thank Tahisha, who took time to speak with me. I don't even remember when that was, earlier this week or perhaps late last week. But my concern about that conversation, as much as I respect the work that you've done in communities outside of Brooklyn, I was left a little bit concerned at the fact that I had reached out to the provider. You didn't reach out to community board. I caught hold of you, and I appreciate that you returned my calls, but you hadn't reached out to the bid or the college or any of the stakeholders. So when you talk about linkage agreements with other community-based organizations to provide services, I want to make sure you know where you are in Brooklyn, and you know what community-based organizations already serve vulnerable populations, and the linkages are at that local level. And I wish you were further ahead in knowing who they are already. You mentioned some of your medical programs, but didn't have a linkage or knowledge of what hospitals serve this area. So there's a lot of work to do to get us to the point of a comfort level. And I especially want to know who that landlord is. I'll stop there. And we have a lot to work on, like the sanitation. Yeah, that is a concern. If you're going to be meal deliveries every day, I hope that you'll contract with somebody who does compostable everything, like the utensils and the plates, everything should be composted. Stuff like that. There's a lot of those little nitty gritty details about service delivery that I hope that we can stay in close communication on. Thanks. Now I really will stop. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just waiting for a response from
Sorry,
either.
I was having trouble with the mute button again. We can certainly follow up on some of the questions relating to the landlord. DHS's contract is with the service provider. If they have more information that they're able to share,
We will
I-
share
I'm
that
welcome to.
with Yuri, and we can have that sent over to you, Sean.
And then in regard to the information about the linkage agreements, Sean, some of the concerns that you raised, and nice to see you again. I appreciated you taking the time a couple weeks ago to connect. We will certainly take that under consideration. The shelter, as I mentioned, isn't slated to open for a minimum 6 months, but these are the exact types of things that we want to make sure that we're being responsive to the community about working with the Children's Rescue Fund. Thank you for raising the issues you did.
So yes, Sean, so thank you for that. So yes, we will be reaching out to the local community-based organizations and health community centers to build relationships. And so we hope to do that moving forward. But, you know, there is a process in terms of the outreach. We just want to make sure that we're following Department of Homeless Services lead and just, you know, just following the protocol. So yes, now that, you know, the notifications have been done, we will definitely be reaching out and building those relationships.
You know where to find me.
All righty, we have just about not even five more minutes. I just want to go through the chat and pick out some questions that had come from our registered speakers while we were going through this process. One of these was, do you have square footage of what the rooms will look like? That's one question that I have, if the operators can answer that.
Eric, do you want to respond? I don't know where you are in terms of the layout and the design at this point.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. Do you know what the square footage is of the rooms?
I can get that information. I don't want to guess. I don't want to guess. So I'll send you that information as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're muted, Joanne.
Thanks. Just bear with me. I just wanted to. This is for Erin Drinkwater. How many shelters are here or planned in this area, and where are they? Sorry if this is repetitive. This is a question from the chat.
No problem. Within the community board, there's one Families with Children shelter that's currently operating, and then there's a shelter that will be opening at Duria Place, and then the one Kenilworth location.
Still again. Okay. I think that's about it. I have time for one more pre-registered speaker. I see a hand from Pam Brown. Did you have follow-up questions? And I have, that being said, I have time for a question from, Mr. David Kelsey, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, why is this system, why, there's a lot of people who trust Erin and are at least trying to trust her, but her record is really horrible. What happened at the Lucerne was just a disaster. It was written about, it was a scandal, and she's known to be quite cruel and dismissive of complaints once the shelter's actually in the area. I linked to that. She was very dismissive of the Upper West Siders. That's why she turned off her video. And she knows I know her story, but others should really research Erin Drinkwater, the Lucerne, and the very concept of the word afflictor, because she's been like that both on. She had to close her Twitters because she was so nasty to people and calling people horrible names on the Upper West Side when they complained about very real, very understandable things like violence, masturbation, sex in public, needle use. I just want everyone to be do not trust Erin Drinkwater. Her track record is terrible.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no additional hands, I'm going to go, Sean, do you have anything we need to add? Otherwise, I'm going to close this public hearing.
Just that I put it in the link a couple of times tonight, but on our website are the additional pages of information that DHS sent over. To answer one of the questions in the chat, the location, the Duryea Place location is not open yet. We hope to have an update from Black Vets for Social Justice about that shelter in the near future. And the other shelter that that was mentioned, I believe, is a shelter that serves people who experience domestic violence. And so the location is not revealed for obvious reasons. And that is it. But check out the website for updates, and certainly any additional information or feedback or insight that you want to get to the community board, just give us a call or email us at the info email address. And thank you all for your participation and insight and input.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Erin Drinkwater for being here and presenting. I want to thank the representatives from the Children's Rescue Fund for their presentation tonight. I want to thank all of our board members for their thoughtful comments and questions, and for our community members and business partners who also asked thoughtful questions. I'm going to close this public hearing at 8:27 this evening. Thank you all for participated. And again, as Sean said, check the website for updates. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone. Bye.